Hey friends, how you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Lamed Daled, Daf 34 of Masechta Ksubis, friends. Daf 34, okay, so we give another answer to the question, the answer of Rish Lakish to the question of why does our Mishnah in Ksubis say that the punishment by onus umafata for, let's say, your sister or for other arais is knas, 50 shekels, and yet in makis it says that the punishment is makis, is lashes. So we had a few answers, the answer of Ula, the answer of Yochanan. Now we see the answer today of Rish Lakish, and then we go into depth regarding his answer. And yeah, we got a lot to do today because we stopped kind of high up yesterday because this kind of goes on for a while today. So here we go. When Daf Lamed Gimel Amud Bey is honestly a little bit more than halfway through the page by the two dots. Rish Lakish Omar Hamani Reb Meir. Oh, so Rish Lakish's take on the situation is that it's Reb Meir, Domer Loko U'Mashalim, who says that you get makis and you also pay, right? So we were assuming up until now Eino Loko U'Mashalim, right? Like the Chachamim, that if you get makis, then you're parted from paying, then you don't pay. Now, Reb Meir's opinion, however, is that no, right? Lo Hashem Amavil Didei Chiyuv Mammon Mavil Didei Chiyuv Chata, something like that. That you chayiv mammon for, you chayiv mammon for, you chayiv makis for, you chayiv makis for, and therefore you taka get both. So our Mishnah that says that if you sleep with your sister, so then it's 50 shekels fine, and the Mishnah in Makis, which says that you get lashes, they don't contradict. You get both. So that's Rish Lakish's opinion. Rish Lakish Amani Reb Meir, that the author of these Mishnayos is Reb Meir, the Omer Loko U'Mashalim, who says that you get both L'maisa. So that's why we say in Ksubis that it's a fine, and in Makis that it's Makis, because it's both. Both are correct. Reb Meir. But if that's true that it's Reb Meir, and it's about Loko U'Mashalim, Afilu Bitonami, ho 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 ho. Friends, who can explain the kasha? The kasha is that we're going to see on Daf Lamed Vav that if a fellow sleeps with his daughter, so then he doesn't pay the 50 shekels fine. And the assumption seems to be that the reason is that, because he's chayiv misa. I think he's chayiv sreifa. I think he's chayiv sreifa. But he's definitely chayiv misa b'dei odom, right? Misa's bezdin. So we want to say, because a fellow who sleeps with his daughter is chayiv misa's bezdin, so therefore he's pater from paying the knas, the fine. But if we're saying that the author of these Mishnayos is Reb Meir, well, just like Reb Meir says that you can get makis and also have to pay money, so Reb Meir would also say that you could be chayiv misa's bezdin and also have to pay money. So then, if it's Reb Meir, then shouldn't the Mishnah on Daf Lamed Vav that we haven't learned yet, shouldn't it say that if a fellow sleeps with his daughter, he'd be chayiv misa's bezdin, but also the knas? Why does the Mishnah say that he's pater from the knas? Friends, that's the question. And if you're going to maybe suggest, well, Meir holds that you can get makis and also have financial obligations, but not so by misa, right? So if you're chayiv misa's bezdin, so then you don't pay any money. Okay, so we can explain that if you sleep with your sister, where there's a chiyuv makis, so there's a chiyuv makis and there's a knas. If you sleep with your daughter, where there's a chiyuv misa's bezdin, so then there's misa's bezdin and there's no knas. Vilo, but is that really true? Does Reb Meir really hold that way? Does Reb Meir really hold Eino Meisu Mishalim? Does it really hold that if you're chayiv misa, then you're pater from paying any money? V'atane, but we learn in a brayse, Gonav v'tovach b'Shabbos, that if a fellow steals, let's say, an ox, and he slaughters it on Shabbos, he steals an ox and he slaughters it on Shabbos, Gonav v'tovach la'avodas kochavim, or if he steals an ox and slaughters it for avodah zarah, Gonav shor niskal utvacho, or if a fellow stole a animal that was condemned to stoning because it killed somebody, Mishalim, right, utvacho, when he slaughtered it, Mishalim tashlume arba v'chamisha div Reb Meir v'chacham poter. Reb Meir says he has to pay daled v'hei, v'chacham says poter. Who can tell me what arba v'chamisha is? Arbava Chamisha is that if you steal an ox, so of course if you steal something, if you're a ganif, so then you have to pay back the item plus kefil. You have to pay twice the amount that you stole. Now, what if a fellow steals an ox and slaughters the ox? He has to pay 5 times the value of the ox that he stole. If he stole a sheep or a goat and he slaughtered it, so then he pays 4 times the amount that he sold. And the reason is because a sheep you would have to schlep through the market and it's embarrassing, whereas an ox you lead through the market and it's not embarrassing. So therefore, because of the kavod abrius, so we say that because he had to humiliate himself by the sheep, so he only has to pay 4 times the amount, but by an ox he pays 5 times the amount, whatever it is. So that's what Daled Vehei is. So Reb Meir is saying that if a fellow steals an ox on Shabbos and then slaughters it, he's chayiv to pay Daled Vehei. Now, one second. If we want to say that Reb Meir holds that if a fellow is chayiv misa bidei adam, that if a person is chayiv misa, and he doesn't have to pay, well then how do we understand this? Because when he slaughters the animal on Shabbos, he's chayiv skila. And if what we're saying is correct, Reb Meir should say that if he's chayiv skila for slaughtering the animal on Shabbos, he should be potter from paying Daled Vehei, and yet Reb Meir is saying that he's chayiv to pay Daled Vehei. So it sounds like Reb Meir's opinion is that just like you get, if you're chayiv malchus, you can also be chayiv mammon. So also if you're chayiv misas bezin, you can be chayiv mammon, as we see that he's slaughtering this animal on Shabbos, and yet he's still chayiv Daled Vehei. Right. So let's read that again. V'atani, we're learning a brayso. Ganav v'tavach b'Shabbos. If a fellow steals an ox and he slaughters it on Shabbos, ganav v'tavach lavodas kucham, or if he slaughtered it for avodah zarah, ganav v'shar niskal tavach, or if he slaughters a ox that's condemned to death to be stoned, utvach, when he slaughtered it. In all of these cases, mishalim tashlumi arba v'chamisha de Remeir, you'd be liable to the 4 and 5 times payments. Right, 4 if it's a sheep or a goat, and 5 if it's an ox. Chacham potter, or was the Chacham say he's potter? Ha'itmar Allah, so says the Gemara, it's not necessarily a proof that Reb Meir would hold that meis u'mishalim, that even if he's chayiv misas bezin, he would still have to pay, because rather, ha'itmar Allah, it was taught about this brayso, Reb Yaakov, Reb Yochanan, says Reb Yaakov in the name of Reb Yochanan, v'amri la, some say, Reb Yirmiyah, Reb Shimon ben Lakish, that Reb Avin v'Rabila v'chochaburasa mishmid Reb Yochanan amrei. Okay, different people say the name of Reb Yochanan. Bitoveach al yedei acher. That somebody else is doing the slaughtering. So let's say if we take the example of Shabbos, so you have Ruvain steals an ox on Shabbos, but he gives it to Shimon the Shaychit to slaughter it. So Shimon is the one who's chayiv misa for slaughtering it, but Ruvain is the one sort of who stole it and made Shimon his messenger to slaughter it. So Ruvain is the one who's going to be chayiv the Daled Vehei. So therefore it's not a situation of Meisu Mishalim, because Ruvain is not actually chayiv misa, he's only chayiv the Daled Vehei. But the Gemara, is that the way it works? Does it really work that Shimon's going to do the shchita and Ruvain is going to be chayiv to pay Daled Vehei? I thought that we have a principle of ein shliach l'dvar avera, that you cannot appoint a messenger to sin for you. The messenger, if he sins, he's responsible for his own actions. So therefore, I don't understand. If Shimon the Shaychit slaughters this stolen animal, shouldn't Shimon the one who should be chayiv be the one who should be chayiv? So Amar Rava, no, not necessarily. Amar Achmana, the Torah says that we compare slaughtering to selling, right? Because I don't know if I mentioned this before, that if he slaughters the animal, he's chayiv Daled Vehei. Alternatively, if he sells it to somebody else, so if he steals an animal and then sells it, so then he's also chayiv Daled Vehei. So the pasuk says that we compare, and we then want to now compare tvacho to mecharu, slaughtering to selling. Just like you sell it to somebody else, Also, slaughtering can be done by somebody else, and therefore, even if Shimon's the one who does the slaughtering, if Reuven stole an animal and Shimon the Shaychit slaughtered it for him, Reuven is going to be the one who's chayiv daled v'hei. So, okay, let's go back there for a second. Devei Rabbi Shmuel Tana, who was taught in the Beis Medrash of Rabbi Shmuel, O l'Rabbos es hashaliach, that when it says utvacho o mecharo, o includes even a messenger. So again, we see that even if the messenger is the one who slaughters it, Reuven could be chayiv daled v'hei. Devei Chizkiya Tana tachas l'Rabbos es hashaliach. Also, the pasuk says, Chamisha Bakr Shalim Tachas Ashor V'Arbatzon Tachas Aseh. Tachas is coming to include a messenger as well. So we see that even if the messenger is the one who slaughters it, Reuven would be chayiv daled v'hei. So we can explain that when it says that if you steal an ox on Shabbos and slaughter it on Shabbos, you're chayiv daled v'hei. According to Reb Meir, Reuven, who stole the ox, is not actually the one who slaughtered it, because if he did slaughter it, then he would be potter from daled v'hei because he'd be chayiv skila. But in this case, Shimon the Shaychit slaughtered the ox, and therefore Shimon the Shaychit is chayiv skila, and Reuven, however, is chayiv daled v'hei. Maskifla, my Zutra asks Akashi, says, I don't understand. We're saying that if Reuven would slaughter the animal, so then he'd be potter from paying daled v'hei, but somebody else, Shimon the Shaychit, slaughters the animal, and all of a sudden he's chayiv to pay daled v'hei. Mi'ika midi, is there really anything, dilu avad ihu loy michayiv, that if Reuven would do it himself, if he would slaughter the ox, he would not be chayiv to pay daled v'hei, v'avid shaliach hu mechayiv, and yet when somebody else slaughters it, all of a sudden, Reuven is chayiv to pay daled v'hei. If he himself would have done it, he'd be potter. Somebody else does it for him, now he's chayiv. So, and for the Gemara, ihu lav mishum delo michayiv. The Gemara says, no, wait a second. Nobody said that, Reuven is not, that if Reuven did it himself, he wouldn't be chayiv daled v'hei. Ihu lav mishum delo michayiv, el mishum de komle b'derab mineh. But because of Kamle B'drab Mineh. Meaning, if Reuven would steal the ox on Shabbos and slaughter it on Shabbos, so nobody said that he'd be potter from daled v'hei, that the daled v'hei wouldn't even exist. There would be daled v'hei. However, there's also another thing, which is the chiyuv skila for slaughtering on Shabbos. And now, we look at everything that we have in front of us. We say, okay, Reuven stole an ox and he slaughtered it on Shabbos. He's chayiv skila for slaughtering the ox on Shabbos. He's chayiv daled v'hei also because he stole and slaughtered, and he's chayiv for both of them. The thing is that the daled v'hei gets overshadowed by the chiyuv skila, and we say kamle b'derab mineh, that he's only going to get one punishment, and it's going to be the more strict, the more severe punishment, which is misa. And therefore, that is why he doesn't have to pay daled v'hei, because he's getting killed. But if Shimon the Shaychit does the shchita for him, and Shimon the Shaychit's the one who's chayiv skila, well now, there's no reason to overlook the daled v'hei that Reuven is chayiv, and therefore Reuven is chayiv daled v'hei. So again, right, it's not that if Reuven would do it himself, then the daled v'hei wouldn't exist. It's that the daled v'hei would get out-strengthened, overpowered by the chiyuv misa, because we say kamle b'derab mineh. But if Shimon the Shaychit is the one who slaughters the animal, and therefore there is no misa for Reuven, well then we can force him to. We could say that that Reuven has to pay daled v'hei. There's nothing overshadowing it. In fact, the Gemara my time of the Rabbon and the Patre. So now the Gemara asks, well, if Reuven is not the one doing the shchita, and therefore Reuven is not chayiv skila, well, how come the rabbis say that he'd be potter from daled v'hei? Right? Reb Meir said that in the situation where he steals this ox on Shabbos and he slaughters it, he's chayiv daled v'hei. The Rabbanan say he's potter from daled v'hei. Now, we had said explained the Brisa as talking about a case where Reuven had stolen the animal, but Shimon the Shaychit is the one who slaughtered it on Shabbos. and that is why Reuven is chayiv dal v'hei. But according to the Chachamim, they say that Reuven would be potter from paying dal v'hei. How come? Right, dal v'hei, of course, being arba v'chamisha, when you slaughter an ox and you chayiv 5 times, a sheep or a goat 4 times. So how can the Chacham say that he'd be potter if he's not the one slaughtering it on Shabbos? So man Chacham Reb Shimon. So first of all, when we say that the Chacham say it's potter, who are these Chacham? It's the opinion of Reb Shimon. The Omar, that Reb Shimon says, Shchita she'nevuya lo yishma shchita, that an improper slaughtering is not considered slaughtering. That an improper slaughtering is not considered slaughtering, so it's not considered like Reuven slaughtered this animal, and therefore he's potter from dal v'hei. To which the Gemara says, 1 second, I can understand how you can get away with saying that it's an improper shchita if you slaughter an animal for avodah zarah. Okay, if you slaughter an animal for avodah zarah, I understand why that's not a proper shchita and why you'd be potter for dal v'hei. And also, if you slaughter an animal that is already condemned to death and is also ba'anoya, so then I think it's also ba'ano. So then I understand why it's not a why it's not a 1 second. Okay, fine. So then Shor Niskal, that if you slaughter a Shor Niskal, it's also not a proper shchita. El shchita Shabbos, shchita ru'uyehi. But if you slaughter an animal on Shabbos, then it should be considered a proper shchita. And if it's considered a proper shchita, so then why does Reb Shimon say that he's potter from paying dal v'hei? The Tanan is, we learn in the Mishnah, Ashoichet b'Shabbos Yom Kippurim, that if a fellow slaughters an animal on Shabbos or on Yom Kippur, Alf Pishim is chayiv b'nafsho, even though he's, chayiv misa, either bidei, right, misa's bezdin on Shabbos or karis on Yom Kippur, nonetheless, shchita so ksher, the shchita is a kosher dik shchita, and therefore, I don't understand. Why would the Rabbanan say that if Reuven steals an ox and Shimon the Shaychit slaughters it on Shabbos, the Rabbanan say, we're saying that the Rabbanan is Reb Shimon, that Reuven would be potter from dal v'hei. I don't understand why. It's a proper shchita. So Sofer Law, Reb Yochanan HaSandler, well, Reb Shimon holds like Reb Yochanan HaSandler, the Tanya when in the Brisa Mavashal b'Shabbos b'Shoigeg, that a fellow who cooks on Shabbos by accident, yoichal, so he can eat it. B'meizid lo yoichal, divrei Meir. But if he cooks on purpose on Shabbos, well then he cannot eat it. Other people can eat it, but he cannot eat it. That's the opinion of Reb Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda b'Shoigeg yoichal l'matzoi Shabbos. That says Rabbi Yehuda that if a fellow cooks on Shabbos by accident, so then he can eat it on Motzoi Shabbos, b'meizid lo yochal ulamis. But if he cooks on Shabbos, then he can never eat it. Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler Omer says, Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler b'Shoigeg yochal Motzoi Shabbos la'acherim v'lo lo, that if he cooks by accident on Shabbos, then on Motzoi Shabbos other people can eat it. B'meizid, if he cooked on purpose on Shabbos, then nobody can ever eat it. So we see that Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler says that if a person slaughters that if a person cooks intentionally on Shabbos, it's completely asur. Not him, not anybody else. My time of Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler. How come Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler says this? It's like Rabbi Chia darshan by the entrance to the Nasi. Ushmartem es Shabbos, that you have to guard Shabbos, ki kodesh ilochem, because it's kodesh. Ma kodesh also ba'achila, that just like when it comes to kodesh, if you make something sanctified for the temple, so it's also ba'achila, you can't eat it, right? If you say that you're going to bring an animal as a korban, well then you can't eat it. So af ma'aseh Shabbos asur ba'achila, also if you intentionally cook on Shabbos or intentionally do some kind of a melacha on Shabbos, it's going to be asur ba'achila. And I think the point is that also by the shchita, if you intentionally slaughter an animal on Shabbos, it's not going to be a proper shchita. Ima kodesh also ba'anoya, af ma'aseh Shabbos also ba'anoya. But if that's the case, if we're making a comparison between ma'aseh Shabbos and kodesh, well, kodesh is also ba'anoya. You can't get benefit from it. So also maybe things that you did on Shabbos, you should be also to get benefit, like you can't even sell it to a Gentile. No, so therefore it says, right, it says, to you, that it's yours, you can get enough from it. Is it possible that even if you do it by accident, it's also, those who sanctify, those who desecrate the Shabbos shall surely die. If you do it intentionally, that's when it's a problem, but not unintentionally, right? That same pasuk, what does it say? The pasuk says, so the same pasuk says, compares Ma'aseh Shabbos to Kodesh, but also it says Mechalel Mos Yumas Dafka B'Meisid, but not B'Shogeg. So there you have it. So the Chachamim, we said, are Reb Shimon, who says that Shchita She'eina Ruya is not considered Shchita, and he holds like Reb Yochanan HaSandler, who says that if you slaughter an animal on Shabbos, it's not a proper Shchita, and therefore it's not considered like you slaughtered this animal, and therefore you're not Chayiv Daled V'Hei, right? So if Reuven stole an ox on Shabbos, and then Shimon the Shochet slaughtered it, so it's not considered a proper Shchita, and therefore Reuven is not going to be Chayiv Daled V'Hei. Now says the Gemara, Pligiba Rav Acha v'Ravina. This is machlokes between Rav Acha and Ravina. Charom Ma'aseh Shabbos D'Oraisa. One of them says that when Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler says that Ma'aseh Shabbos is Osir B'Achila, so we say that that's D'Oraisa. V'Charom D'Rabbanan. The other one says that when Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler says that it's Osir, it only means D'Rabbanan. Man D'Omer D'Oraisa K'dam Morin. So the Man D'Omer says it's Me'er D'Oraisa, as we said, based on the pasuk of Ushmartem Es HaShabbos Ki Kodesh Ilochem. Man D'Omer D'Rabbanan, that and the opinion who says that when Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler says that Ma'aseh Shabbos is also, it only means D'Rabbanan. Omer Kra Kodesh He Kodesh Ve'ed Ma'aseh Kodesh. He learns out from the fact that it says Kodesh He, that Shabbos itself is Kodesh, but not Ma'aseh Shabbos, not those things that are the activities that are done on Shabbos. Those are not Kodesh. Now, if according to the opinion who says that according to Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler, Ma'aseh Shabbos is also D'Rabbanan, but Midoraisa it's mutter. So then, how do we understand the opinion of Reb Shimon, who says that if you steal an ox and slaughter it on Shabbos, you potter from Daled V'Hei? If we're saying that, it's Midoraisa, it's a proper shchita. Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler says Midorabanon, it's not a proper shchita, but Midoraisa it is a proper shchita. So shouldn't he be Chayiv Daled V'Hei? Ki kapatra Abanon Ashayre Enochinami. When Reb Shimon says, or when the Rabbanon, who says the opinion of Reb Shimon, says that it will be potter from Daled V'Hei, it's talking about when he slaughters it for Avodah Zarah, it's talking about when he slaughters a Shor Niskal, it's not talking about when he steals an ox on Shabbos and then slaughters it, and then, Shimon the Shochet slaughters it. So in that case, he would take, according to the opinion who says, Rabbi Yochanan HaSandler says that Ma'aseh Shabbos is only also Midur Rabbanon, so then he would be Chayiv Daled V'Hei. Fine. Now, continuing in that brisa, right, we gave 3 examples. If you steal and slaughter an animal on Shabbos, if you steal and slaughter an animal for Avodah Zarah, and if you steal and slaughter a Shor Niskal. So now it says the Gemara, Taveach la'avodas kochav. In fact, the Gemara, in the situation where, I believe that we're talking about where Reuven steals an ox, and then Shimon the Shochet slaughters it for Avodah Zarah. I believe that that's the case. So Taveach la'avodas kochav. So if Shimon the Shochet is slaughtering for Avodas kochav, came the Shochat Beipurta. Once Shimon the Shochet starts slaughtering it, it becomes Osir as Avodah Zarah. Even once he makes the first nick in the neck of the nick in the neck of the animal, so then at that point it becomes Osir, because he's doing it for Avodah Zarah. And Idach, and then the continuation when he keeps on moving that knife and making the incision deeper and more lethal, ki katovach lav demari katovach. And therefore, once he makes the first nick, it's already osur ba'anoah to the original owner, because it's now for Avodah Zarah. So the person who he stole it from, it's no longer his, essentially. It's osur to him ba'anoah, because Shimon the Shochet is slaughtering it, making it osur ba'anoah. So, and therefore, so it becomes also bano immediately, but the shchita is only considered proper shchita once it's slaughtered properly. The majority of both of the windpipe and the trachea. That's the same thing. The trachea and the esophagus. So therefore, by the time that Shimon the Shoichet is finished with the Shechita and it's actually considered Tovach, that he would be Chayiv Dal V'Hei, at that point it already was Asur Bano to the original owner, in which case he shouldn't be Chayiv Dal V'Hei. So how come Reb Meir says that he is Chayiv Dal V'Hei, if basically when Shimon the Shoichet finishes the Shechita, it's no longer the original owners? So Ki Katovach Lav Demari Katovach, he's not slaughtering the original owner's ox. Omer says Rava Ba'omer Bigmar Zvicho Ovda. If Shimon the Shoichet says, look, I'm right, it's only going to be considered Avodah Zarah. I'm definitely doing this Avodah Zarah, and I want that the Shechita for Avodah Zarah should only kick in at the end. So the Memele, it's kicking in at the same time that he's also doing the Shechita, and therefore he's Chayiv Daled V'Hei. Shora Niskol, we also have a kasha regarding Shora Niskol. Right? In this case, I don't know if we need to necessarily say Shimon the Shoichet, I think in this case, if you have a shor, an ox that killed somebody, now we have to stone it, and then Ruvain, the Ganif, steals the ox and slaughters it, and we say that he's going to be Chayiv Dal V'Hei. But now, fact the Gemara, Shor Niskol Lavdide Hu de Katovach. He's not slaughtering the ox of the fellow who he stole it from. Because at the time that the ox became condemned for skila, it became Asur Ba'ano. Right? I just looked it up. I think that seems to be the case. It becomes Asur Ba'ano from that point on. And therefore, it's Asur Ba'ano to the owner, and it's not considered like it's the owner's. And therefore, right, he's not slaughtering the ox of the owner. So again, Shor Niskol, if Ruvain the Ganif, steals an ox from somebody, and then he slaughters it, he's not slaughtering the victim's ox, since it was a Shora Niskol, and a Shora Niskol is already also Ba'ana to anybody, including the original owner. On my Rave, says Rave, my skin on here, what are we talking about? Kigon, for example, Shemisaro La Shomer. That, well, it was talking about a situation where you have a guy who gives it to a custodian, a watchman, to watch. Behezik bebeis HaShomer. And the ox then damaged and killed a person while in the house of the watchman. V'nigmar dinei bebeis shomer. And while it was in the property, in the possession of the watchman, Bezdin said that we have to kill this ox for killing a human. So we have to stone this ox. At which point comes Reuven the Ganif, Vignovo Ganif mi beis shomer. And then the Ganif steals the ox from the watchman. Reb Meir Sovala Krib Yaakov Sovala Krib Shimon. And Reb Meir, who says that if the Ganif slaughters the ox, he's going to be Chayiv Daled V'Hei. So he holds like Reb Yaakov and also like Reb Shimon. What does that mean? Sovala Krib Yaakov, he holds like Reb Yaakov the Amar Af Mishrig Martino Hechzir Shomer Levayla of Muchzer. That he holds like Reb Yaakov, that if the watchman, even after the ox killed somebody else, and Bezdin says that we have to stone this ox, if the watchman now gives the ox back to the original owner, he's off the hook. He doesn't need to pay for the ox, right? Meaning, in general, if something would happen to the ox, he would have to pay back the original owner. But in this case, if he gives back the ox to the original owner, even though he's giving him back an ox that's Asur Ba'Noah because it's condemned to stoning, nonetheless, it's considered like he gave it back and he doesn't have to pay anything else to the owner. V'savar Reb Shimon, and Reb Meir also holds like Reb Shimon the Omar, Davar Agorim L'Mamin Kimamin Dami. That Reb Shimon's opinion is that something that can cause can be treated as a financial instrument, then it's considered like money. And therefore, since this ox, when the watchman can give it back to the original owner, whereby he is potter from paying anything else to the original owner, even though this ox is condemned for death, as chayiv skila. But since it has financial value or can be used as a financial instrument to the extent that if the watchman gives it back to the owner, he doesn't have to pay anything else. He's off the hook for having to pay anything else to the original owner. So therefore it's considered like mammon. and because it's considered like mammon, so therefore, if Reuven the Ganif slaughters it, he's going to be chayiv dalid vehei. Okay, and now we get to sort of a new take, right? Meaning, okay, going back to the beginning of the Gemara, we had the opinion of Rish Lakish, who says that how do we understand, how do we reconcile our Mishnah in Ksubis that says that by, if you sleep with your sisters and there's the 50 shekels fine, and also the Mishnah in Makis, which says that you get lashes. So we had Ula, who said it's talking about a Bulgaris. We read Reb Yochanan, who said that it's talking about, well, it depends if you got warned from Makis or not. Right, now we have Rish Lakish who's saying, well, it's the opinion of Reb Meir who says that you get both. Then we had the Kasha, but if you get both, right, and so then I don't understand, then how can we say that if you sleep with your daughter, then you're patur for the fine? Shouldn't you get both? So we say, well, there's a distinction between Makis and Misa. By Makis, you get both. You get Makis and Mammon, but you don't get Misa and Mammon. If you chayiv Misa, you're patur from Mammon. To which we asked the Kasha, but what do you mean? We said that if you steal an ox and slaughter it on Shabbos, then you're still chayiv Dal Vehei, even though you can be chayiv Misa for slaughtering an animal on Shabbos. And the answer was, so we said that you're chayiv Misa for slaughtering on Shabbos and still you're chayiv Dal Vehei. So the answer was no. In that case, he's not the one doing the slaughtering, so therefore he's not the one who's chayiv Misa. Shimon the Shaychid is doing the slaughtering, and therefore Reuven is only chayiv Dal Vehei. Comes Rabbah Omer L'Olam Toveach Hayde Atzma. Comes Rabbah, and he says that actually Reuven is the one who's slaughtering the animal. Reuven is the Ganif, and Reuven is the Shoichet. For Meir, local Mishalim Islay, Mesu Mishalim Leislay. And regarding our Mishnayos and how to reconcile our Mishnayos, it's like we suggested, that Reb Meir holds local Mishalim, he doesn't hold Mesu Mishalim. And therefore, when it comes to sleeping with one's sister where there's Makis, so that yes, you can get Makis, and you also pay the fine. But when it comes to one's daughter, so since you chayiv Misa's Bezdin, you're patur from the fine. Okay. V'shayni hane the chidish hu shechid Torah biknas afagav the miktol mishalim. And when it comes to paying dalid vehei, that if a fellow slaughters an ant, right, steals and slaughters an ox on Shabbos, he's going to be chayiv to pay 5 times the value of the ox. So the reason why he's chayiv in that case is because it's a fine. A fine is a chiddush, right? Technically speaking, if I steal your ox and I slaughter it, I should pay you back for what I stole. I should pay you back the value of the ox. The idea that we pay 5 times the value of the ox, it's a chiddush. Logically speaking, I wouldn't have necessarily concluded that. And therefore, because it's a chiddush, in that case, even though he's chayiv Misa, he's still going to be chayiv to pay for this knas. It's not, right? Yeah, if he's chayiv Misa, he's patur for mammon. Sure. The Gemara is going to ask, but then isn't the 50 shekels fine? Shouldn't he be chayiv for the fine if it's right for the 50 shekels if it's a fine? Okay, forget about that for now. We'll get back to that. Now, so therefore, so says Rabbah, the reason why he's chayiv dal v'hei when he slaughters the animal on Shabbos, even though he's chayiv misa for slaughtering it, is because the dal v'hei is a knas, which is a chiddush, and therefore even though he's chayiv misa, he's still going to be chayiv for the dal v'hei, which is a chiddush, which is a knas, and is not cancelled by his chiyuv misa. So now, the Rabbah the Taime, and Rabbah is consistent with his reasoning. The Amar Rabbah, the Rabbah says, Hoy gedi gonavlo, that if a fellow during the week stole a goat, and therefore at the time that he stole the goat, he was already chayiv to pay back the principal of the goat that he stole. Utvachu b'Shabbos, but then comes Shabbos and he slaughters the goat. So now he's chayiv skila for slaughtering on Shabbos, but also at the point now on Shabbos when he slaughters, at that point he's chayiv for, right, in this case dalet 4 times, right dalet vei, but in this case it's dalet, it's 4 times because it's a goat. Chayiv. So then, says Rabbah, he's going to be chayev skila for slaughtering, but also to pay Dalet Vehei, because that's what he became liable for on Shabbos. Shekvan is chayev b'gneva kodem shavu l'dei Isur Shabbos, because the principle of the goat he was already chayev before Shabbos. What he becomes chayev for on Shabbos is by slaughtering it. Now he's chayev the Dalet Vehei, which is a knas, which is a chiddush. And in that case, he's going to be chayev skila, but also chayev to pay the knas of Dalet Vehei. Ganav v'tovach b'Shabbos, but if he stole the goat and slaughtered it, all of that on Shabbos, well then potter. Well then he's going to be potter, shemen gneva and tvicha ve'mechira. Because if there's no gneva, if there's no principle, because we're saying that if he's chayev misa, he's chayev skila for slaughtering on Shabbos, and he also stole it on Shabbos, and we're saying that he's potter for the mammon, he's potter for the keren, for the principle of that which he stole, because because ein meisu mishalim, that if you chayev misa, you'll be potter from mammon, and the principle is the mammon. The Dalet Vehei is the knas, but the principle, right, the value of the sheep, of the goat, is the mammon, and we're saying that he's potter for that because it's Shabbos. So for his chayev misa, for his chayev skila for slaughtering on Shabbos, he's going to be potter for the principle of the goat. Since he's potter from the principle of the goat, he's also potter from any other payments of the goat, and therefore he's going to be potter from paying. V'amar Rabba also says, "Hayegdi ganavlo utvachu b'machteres." Woo! Friends, who could tell me what a machteres is? What's a baba machteres? We're going to learn about it in Masechet Sanhedrin. A baba machteres is a case where a fellow tunnels into a house. If you have a ganif, and he makes a tunnel underneath the house in order to break into the house and steal stuff. Now he knows when tunneling, he's prepared. He's prepared for all options. That when he sneaks into the house, the owner, he's not just going to stand idly by and get robbed. He's going to put up a fight. And he knows that if he gets caught, the owner might kill him. And therefore, he's ready to kill the owner before he himself gets killed. So therefore, he's basically, right, and therefore the owner is permitted to kill the ganif, right, because he knows that his life is in danger. So now here's a situation where you have a ganif who's basically in a situation where his life is over, right? Meaning he's allowed, the owner of the house is allowed to kill him. So you have a guy who's basically chayev misa, because he's tunneling into a house and the owner has the right to kill him. And he then, so what does it say? If a fellow had already, right, this ganif was a serial ganif, and he had already stolen a goat during, some other time. So at the time that he stole the goat, he was chayiv to pay back the owner the principal of the goat that he stole, but then he takes it with him on his next raid. He takes it with him into his tunnel that he dug, and he slaughters it in the tunnel. So at the time that he slaughtered it, he was basically chayiv misa, and that's also the time that he's chayiv for Dalet Vehei. But he's also essentially, in a sense, chayiv misa at that time. So chayiv, he's going to be chayiv to pay the Dalet Vehei. Shekvan is chayiv b'gneva kodem shavu de Isur machteres, because he was already, he had stolen it in advance, and he was chayiv to pay the principal of the goat already in advance, and therefore by slaughtering it in the tunnel at a time that he was basically chayiv misa, he's only needs to now pay for the additional, essentially Dalet Vehei payment. So he's going to be chayiv for that because it's a chiddush. Gonav v'tovach b'machteres, but if he stole it and slaughtered it in the tunnel, well then potter. Then he's potter for paying any of it. Shemein gneva in tvicha ve'in mechir. Since he's potter from the principle of it, since he's basically chayiv misa at the time that he's stealing it in this machteres, well then, since he's potter for the principle, he's also potter for the fine. Utzricha, we need both cases. The case of slaughtering the goat on Shabbos and the case of slaughtering in the tunnel. The Ashmin on Shabbos, because if we would be let known the case of Shabbos, that if he stole it in advance but slaughtered it on Shabbos, he's chayiv. Mishum de isura isur olam, because Shabbos is an isur that is always going to be there. Right? It's a right. It says Rashi calls manche idu olav shechilel Shabbos yimisu bezdin ilka chamira misa dila lefochu mamon. That since Shabbos is more stringent in that if at any point witnesses testify that this fellow slaughtered this animal on Shabbos, so then he's going to be chayiv skila. And therefore I might say that since that case of slaughtering the goat on Shabbos is more stringent, so that is why he's going to be chayiv to pay for the knas, for the daled v'hei. Hava machteres the isur shahu, but machteres where he's only chayiv misa at the time that he's in the tunnel. Once he's out of the tunnel, the owner can no longer kill him. So so maybe I would say that he wouldn't have to pay daled v'hei. And if we had only the case of the tunnel, because we have a principle that, if a fellow's tunneling underneath the house, he basically knows that he's getting himself into a situation where he can be killed, and he doesn't even need a warning. So that makes that more stringent. But Shabbos, where you would have to warn somebody in order for him to be chayiv skila, I would say maybe he wouldn't have to pay the fine tzricha, so therefore we need both of these cases. Rav Papa says, Rav Papa, if a fellow had a cow that was already stolen to him in advance, so up until now we were talking about a goat, now we're talking about a cow, and it was stolen in advance, and he slaughtered it on Shabbos chayiv, so he's going to be chayiv skil, and also chayiv to pay daled v'hei. Shekvan is chayiv b'gneva called him shavli deis Shabbos, because he's already chayiv for the principle beforehand, and now it's only for the fine. The fine is a chiddush, so he's chayiv both skila and the daled v'hei. What if he had an ox that he was borrowing? Utvacha b'Shabbos, and on Shabbos then he slaughters it. So basically it's Shabbos. He's chayiv skila for slaughtering on Shabbos, and also at the time that he's slaughtering it, he's also basically stealing it, and he's chayiv for daled v'hei. Meaning at that point he would be chayiv daled v'hei, but since he's chayiv for daled v'hei at the time that he's stealing it, which is also Shabbos, then potter, because since he won't be chayiv for the principle, he's also not chayiv for the daled v'hei. Amalei Rav Acha b'Derava Rav Ashi. This is Rav Acha b'Derava to Rav Ashi. Rav Papa Paro also lashminon. Rav Acha b'Derava says to Rav Ashi, I don't understand. What is Rav Papa coming to teach us that it doesn't just apply to a goat? The same thing would apply to an ox. What's the chiddush over here? Amalei Rav Papa she'ula also lashminon. What? No, I'm sorry. Amarle. So Rav Ashi responds to Rav Acha b'Derava that Rav Papa she'ula also lashminon. That Rav Papa is coming. The chiddush here is about the she'ula, about the fact that we're talking about a borrowed animal. Because Agadaite Chamina, I may have thought to say, Hol v'Omer Rav Papa mishas mishicha hu deschayev le b'mizonosel. That since Rav Papa says that at the time that the borrower pulls the animal, he's already chayiv to pay for its food. So Hachanami, I would say mishas she'ele is chayiv ba'onse. I may thought that already is chayiv for if anything happens to it, such as if it gets slaughtered, he would be chayiv already from the time that he initially pulled it away from the person he borrowed it from. And therefore, it would be that the principal would already be chayiv from then, before, at the time that he borrowed it. And on Shabbos, he would only be chayiv for the daled v'hei. Kamash malan, then no. He's only chayiv for the own sin if anything happens. He's only chayiv if anything happens to this animal at the time that it happens. And therefore, when he slaughters this borrowed animal on Shabbos, he's going to be potter for daled v'hei, since he's chayiv skila, but also chayiv for the principal and the daled v'hei on Shabbos, and therefore he's potter for the principal, therefore he's potter also for the daled v'hei. On my Rav says Ravi niachloin avi and parish she'ula, that if you have a fellow and he dies, and at the time that he died, he was borrowing an animal, I don't know, for let's say a month, whatever it is, and now his children inherit that rental. So mishtam shimba kol yemei she'elasa, so they can continue to use it until the rental is over, or until the borrowing is over. Mesa ein chayav b'onsa. But if it dies, whereas the father, if it died, in the father's possession, he'd be chayiv to pay the owner who he borrowed it from. But the kids would not be chayiv; they'd be potter because they're not the ones who borrowed it. The father borrowed it. Now, kisvurin shel aviem he, Now, if they thought that that it was their father's cow, they didn't realize that it was a borrowed cow, and they said, all right, well, our father, I guess, had a cow, let's eat it. Utvachua, so they slaughtered it, v'achlua, and they ate it, and then it turns out that, oops, this cow was borrowed. Mishamat me basar b'zol, so they pay a discounted price, right? They made a mistake, they slaughtered the animal, they didn't realize, they thought it was their father's, they didn't realize that if their father had borrowed it, so they could pay a discounted price on the meat. 2/3 the price. Now, if their father had left for them not just a cow but also property, well, then they have to pay. Now, the question is this talking about the Reisha or the Sefer? Is it talking about when the animal died, so then they would have to pay back the owner, or is it saying that when they accidentally slaughtered the cow, then they'd have to pay back the animal, the owner, in the event that the father left for them property? So those who say that this thing about the property and the kids being chayiv, to those who say that that's talking about the case of the Reisha, talking about where the animal died inexplicably when in the custodianship of the children. And those who say that it's talking about when they slaughtered the animal because they didn't realize that it was borrowed. So the one who says that even when the animal dies on its own, if they have property, they have to pay it back. They have to pay for the animal. Kol shekain aseifa. So then, certainly then, in the case of the seifa, when they slaughtered the animal, they would also have to pay it back from the property that was left for them. Ufliga de Rav Papa. And that argues on Rav Papa, right? Because Rav Papa had just said a few minutes ago that if he slaughters the animal, right, that if he borrowed an animal and he slaughters it on Shabbos, he's going to be potter from Dalad Vehei, because at the time that he slaughters it is when he's chayiv for the onsin, right? Is at that point that he's chayiv and it's Shabbos, so therefore he's potter for the principal and also any other payments. So now if we say that the children would be, that if the father left property for his children, so then they are chayiv to pay back. In the case where the cow died, that's basically saying that at the time that the father borrowed the cow, he was, right, his property became sort of tied into this lease, right, to this borrowing, to the extent that if anything happens from that point on, he would be responsible for it. And therefore, if the father left property for his kids, so that, and then the animal died, so he'd be chayiv to pay for it because he was already chayiv from the time that he borrowed it, which is different than Rav Papa, who says that he's only going to be chayiv for onsin, right, if anything happens to the cow from the time that the thing happens. And the one who says that the children are only responsible to pay back the owner if they slaughtered the animal, but if but if the animal died on its own, they would not need to pay back the owner. So that's in agreement with their papa, who says that, yeah, I mean, it's only at the time that the animal dies. At that point, they would be chayiv, and at that point, it was in the property of the children, and therefore they are potter to pay back the owner. Well, friends, that was daf lamed daled of Masechet Ksubis. That was kind of an involved daf. I learned it on the plane yesterday. That's not the kind of daf you want to learn on a plane. You want an easy daf on an airplane. Anyways. So yeah, we saw the opinion of Rish Lakish, right? Who, in addition to Ula, in addition to Rabbi Yochanan, we also have the opinion now of Rish Lakish, who says that these two Mishnayos, how can you reconcile by the sister, Knas and also Malchus? So we said, well, it's Rav Meir who says that you get both. We said, if that's the case, then how do you understand when he sleeps with his daughter, where he says he's potter from Knas? Shouldn't he be chayiv Misa and the Knas as well? So we say, well, Rav Meir holds that you, while you can get Malchus and Mammon, you don't get Misa and Mammon. That's why you're potter from paying the fine when you sleep with your daughter, where you're chayiv Misa. Now, then we ask the kasha, but Reb Meir seems to be saying that if you steal and slaughter an animal on Shabbos, so then you are chayiv dalad vehei. So there you're chayiv skila, and you're also chayiv dalad vehei. So we saw two ways to understand that. One way to understand that is talking about, well, he's not the one who slaughtered it. Shimon the Shoichet slaughtered it. And Shimon the Shoichet is chayiv skila, he's chayiv dalad vehei. Okay? Another way to understand it is like Rabbah explained, that no, he's the one who slaughtered it, but dalad vehei is a knas, which is a chiddush. And because it's a chiddush, so therefore he can be chayiv even if he's the one who slaughtered it. Now this is dafka if he's only chayiv for the fine on Shabbos, i.e. he had stolen it in advance and then only slaughtered it on Shabbos, so then he's chayiv to pay for the fine. But if he had stolen it and slaughtered it on Shabbos, then he'll be chayiv to pay for the principal as well, in which case he'd be potter for paying, because he's going to be potter from paying mammon if he's chayiv skila. We then also discussed the opinion of Rav Papa, who says that if a fellow if a fellow borrows a ox and then he slaughters it on Shabbos, it'll be chayiv skila and it'll be potter from paying dal veh, because it's considered like he stole it, and therefore chayiv in the principal at the time that he slaughters it on Shabbos, and at that point he's potter from the principal because he's chayiv misa skila for slaughtering, so then he's going to be potter from dalid veh. Friends, that was the Daf Lamed Aleph of Masechta Ksubis. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.